Rochester, New York, July 2016. In the small, sleepy village of Pittsford lived the Rideout family, 50-year-old IT specialist and programmer Craig, his wife Laura, and their 7 children. The eldest was Colin, followed by Andrew, Alexander, Elizabeth, Julia, Patrick, and Madeline. Craig had met and married Laura in 1993, and they couldn't wait to start a family of their own, having their first baby just a short while later, and being extremely close to his sister Robin and her children. Everyone said that family was all that mattered to Craig. He was well known in his community, often working with youth groups, organizing charity events, and in his spare time he loved gaming. Though a big and bustling family had always been a dream of Craig's, this undoubtedly came with financial issues, and he often was away due to his long working hours. Robin said that Laura didn't really seem to worry as much as Craig about money, but things got more stressful when bankruptcy conversations started happening, and the family were forced to move house and downsize. Laura had openly not been happy for a while, and a wedge had started forming between her and Craig and her in-laws. Laura and some of the kids soon stopped showing up for holiday dinners at Craig's family, and when Robin said, "Are you guys coming?" one of the children would often respond with, "Oh, Mom's not feeling well." But then another kid would say, "That's not true, Mom didn't want to come." Laura presented Craig with divorce papers in 2014, and sometime during this period she got close to and moved in with a family friend, Paul Tucci, known as PJ. Paul's wife Jennifer had sadly passed away around the same time as Craig and Laura split. Paul and Craig actually went back as far as college, and their children had grown up together, almost into one big family. Paul was even godfather to Colin. Craig wanted Laura to be happy and loved his old friend dearly, so he was putting on a brave face, but deep down he was finding it tough seeing them together. With a pending divorce and custody issues now happening, his stresses were mounting. Craig was eventually awarded primary custody of Patrick and Madeline, and Elizabeth and Julia would also live with him. His 3 oldest children, Andrew, Colin, and Alex, who were over the age of 18, could live where they wanted, with Colin and Alex staying with Laura and Paul. Craig was now trying to rebuild bridges with the older children as well as his ex-wife. The relationships, especially with Alex and Colin, seemed to be going south for reasons he just couldn't understand. Alex had put a post out on Facebook calling his dad a coward and emotionally abusive. Robin had seen the post and immediately called Craig. This was so out of left field. Robin said her brother was devoted to his kids and would never intentionally hurt them. She wanted to respond to Alex and defend Craig, but Craig said to leave it. He didn't want to create a public scene. On July 13, 2016, Craig was woken up by an intruder in his bedroom. Someone dressed all in black had burst in, plucked a hair from his arm, stole his BlackBerry, and ran off. Craig found his keys in a plant pot outside. Craig told police he thought the person in his house was possibly his son, Colin, playing some sort of weird prank. But when an email from Colin came in, it was clear there was no joking around here. His oldest son leveraged more heavy accusations against Craig, and the email was cutting. He called him Craig, not Dad, accused him of dragging out the divorce to hurt his mother, faking the break-in at his home, and blaming his children for what he called heinous deeds. At this point, Craig, already frustrated with Laura's attempts to turn everyone against him, was firm with Colin. He asked why he couldn't just reach out to him instead of ignoring him for months, then launching an attack via email. And as for the divorce and custody, Craig knew exactly what was going on in the courts. He had even complained to his attorney that Laura had misscheduled pickups, showing up without notice, changing plans, and missing picking the children up from school. One day, Laura had even left all of the children on Craig's doorstep without telling him. Robin also said that if Craig was abusive, there was no way he would have been awarded custody. Safe to say, Craig was dealing with a lot and was leaning on his sister now more than ever. He would go to her for advice about everything and anything, and they were in contact almost hourly. But on the morning of July 19, 2016, the prompt contact and swift replies were non-existent. Robin was not able to get through to Craig either on his work or personal phone. She called his work but was told he had sent an email the night before saying his daughter was sick and he wouldn't be contactable. Robin drove straight to his house. His minivan was missing, and as she walked towards the door, she saw a figure through the window. It was Laura. Laura said she came over to look for Craig as the children said he wasn't there when they woke up. She had stayed to clean the kitchen as there was a funny smell. Robin nervously took a quick look around the house and saw his shoes neatly lined up, his jacket on the door, and his belongings still there. Unable to put her panic aside anymore, she called 911. The police obtained a search warrant and a missing persons report was filed. Laura, along with Craig's 2 youngest children, Madeline and Patrick, spoke to the officers. Nothing seemed disturbed. No expensive items were missing. There were no smashed windows or signs of a forced entry. Inside the basement, things were a little more messy than upstairs. But as it was only used for storage, this wasn't that weird. However, as they looked closer, they saw red spots on some of the boxes, and inside a bin bag there was a handmade garrote covered in blood. Some bags contained leatherwork gloves which looked stained with blood, and a spray of luminol found blood not only on the floor but on the walls too. Blood did not look like it had been there long at all. As everything was bagged up and sent for testing, investigators turned their attention to Craig's phone. Calls were going through, so his phone was still on. This meant that getting data from his phone provider and finding the last known location would be a lot easier. It showed the phone as being about 50 miles away from his house. And in this exact spot, all those miles away, little did anyone realize another investigation was underway. At 7:53 that morning, the police had received a call. They found a shovel by the roadside and there was a trail of blood too. They followed it over to some brown tarp, and when they walked around the back, they saw a foot poking out. Police and paramedics arrived, but it was clear that nothing could be done, and it did not take long for them to identify the deceased male. Investigators suddenly heard a phone buzzing. It was coming from under the tarp. The caller ID was Robin Drew, Craig's sister. They had to wait for an official identification, but it was pretty clear. It was Craig. The medical examiner said he had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head and neck and facial fractures. There was a deep indentation of the skin all the way around the neck, which showed a device was used to strangle him. A strong acid had been poured onto his body to try and make him unidentifiable. It was so powerful it had eaten through his clothes and even exposed bone in some places. Found in the tarp were white bottle caps, potentially the caps from the bottles containing the acid. They did not believe he had been killed there. The murder scene was likely his basement, and then his killer or killers had moved him here. Later that evening, as Robin was still at Craig's house, and Paul showed up with the two youngest children, Laura told the detective they were dropping the children off as per their arrangements. And had they found Craig? She admitted she'd been at the house earlier that day cleaning. But she and Paul had no idea where Craig was, and was hoping he had returned home from wherever he'd been. Robin told the police that her brother had a camera in the house, which they had found disguised as a digital alarm clock in the kitchen, and it was pointing directly at the main walkway in the house. If anyone was to enter or leave Craig's home, they should have been caught. But there was nothing even remotely concerning on the footage. It showed the family going about their day, cooking and going to school, but nothing more than that. It seemed that once the memory was full, it did not rewrite itself, it simply stopped recording. So sadly, they didn't have anything around the time they believed Craig had been killed. Such a positive lead had just reached a dead end. The search continued. With the murder scene in one county and his body in another, investigators had a lot of ground to cover. But only a day later, on July 21st, investigators were alerted to a location, chillingly called Devil's Bathtub, in Mendham Pond Park. A local dog walker had raised the alarm when she had spotted two people acting suspiciously, throwing rubbish bags out of their car and into the pond. The officers apprehended them. It was none other than Colin Rideout and Alex Rideout. At this point, only Robin knew that her brother was dead. It was as good as confirmed, but not until the dental records came back. Colin told the detectives he was worried about his father, hoping he was found safe and well, and Alex was claiming he had no idea what was in the bags. Colin then admitted that his mom had asked them to dump everything. Before long, Alex actually planted them at their dad's house, admitting he had seen blood in the basement. Bags contained paper towels covered in blood, bloody clothing and shoes, and 4 bottles of very strong drain cleaner matching the ones found with his body. Investigators had the idea to go to get the brothers some food and a drink, so they went to a local fast food chain with the intentions of taking the straws they used to obtain the DNA. After this, Alex and Colin were both arrested for tampering with evidence, but the police knew there was more to it. They then headed straight to Paul and Laura's house to place them under arrest too. Laura was shocked, and the police said to her, "You must have been expecting this." She coolly replied, "If I was expecting this, I would have put on some makeup before grabbing some heels to wear to the station." She seemed very confident that she would be returning home. A look around the couple's house found that she had a spare fob to Craig's car and some blue tape that was used to make the homemade garrote that they believed was used to strangle Craig. However, at this point, the 4 could only be arrested for tampering with evidence. They were eventually let out on bail. A few days later, it came as no surprise when the medical examiner officially confirmed it was definitely Craig's body. With the 4 suspects out on bail, The police needed to connect everyone to the place where Craig's body had been dumped, and they had been pulling cameras from the main roads between the two counties. Investigators looked at the cell phone data again, which highlighted a rough view locations of where his phone had been. Using that information, they were able to plot out a route from Craig's house to the location his body was found in, and request all footage on said route. They knew his phone had left home at roughly 3 a.m. on the morning of July 19th, when his body was being moved and traffic would have been light, so spotting cars was much easier. They came across some footage from a hotel about halfway between the two locations. They captured two vehicles speeding through the frame very close to each other, linked to Craig's moving phone. The footage at night was unclear, so they could not make out any identifiable features of the passing vehicles. They wanted to see if the same route back home was used, so they fast-forwarded the tape to see if they could catch the vehicles in a convoy. They caught a dark-colored sedan and a white minivan matching the description of Craig's van going back along the same road. They were able to locate the vehicles traveling together on 6 more cameras. Though they did not know the final destination of these vehicles, this confirmed their thoughts that there was more than one person involved in this murder. Craig's van was eventually found in a parking lot of the local Park and Ride. But with no cameras covering this spot, they couldn't tell who parked it. Using card transactions, investigators were led to a Walmart. The Rideouts and Paul had made 3 trips to Walmart in the 24 hours around Craig's death. First, they saw a sedan pull up, and a male got out of the back seat and went into the store. They identified him as Colin. He was captured purchasing the shovel along with 4 pairs of work gloves. He exited and returned to the same car, but extra enhancements on another camera showed at least 3 other people in the vehicle, but it was just too hard to see them clearly. Using more receipts and car data, another transaction at the same Walmart was located for the drain cleaner. It showed Laura, Colin, and one of her daughters in the store. Colin then purchased the cleaner, the brown tarp that had been used to wrap up Craig's body, more drain cleaner, the bungee cord used to make the murder weapon, and a bottle of Coke had also been purchased at another Walmart on the 19th of July at 9 p.m., just a few hours before they believed Craig was killed. Laura Rideout was seen entering, but this time with Paul Tucci. The police started to test the DNA on the uncovered items. The clothes found in the bags at the pond matched the clothes worn by Colin when he was seen purchasing the shovel. And Alex's DNA was found on the items in the basement of Craig's home as well. The trousers Laura was seen wearing when purchasing the brown tarp were also in the bags, and her DNA was also found on a bottle of Diet Coke in Craig's basement. Paul Tucci's clothes that he was seen wearing in the Walmart footage were never located. However, his DNA was found on things inside the bag in the pond. Laura, Paul, Colin, and Alex were all charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence, and they pleaded not guilty to everything. Further investigation in Paul's home led to one more arrest. 19-year-old Theodore Tucci, Paul's son, was charged with being in possession of several child abuse material. The only motive that presented itself was the pending move and custody battle. Detectives believed that Laura had done everything she could to try and turn her children against Craig. Laura and Paul had already taken out a lease on a place in North Carolina just 3 weeks before Craig was killed, and when Laura said she wanted her children to go with them, Craig said no way. This set the plan in motion. Just days after signing the lease, Laura sent a text to Colin asking for his help in getting custody of her 2 youngest children. Via text, they made a plan to try and get her 2 youngest daughters to provoke Craig somehow. They hoped he would get angry enough or aggressive enough so Laura could call the police and have them taken away. Colin texted one of his younger sisters asking them to make sure they called 911 if he even raised his voice. The correct verbiage to get their attention would be, "He's trying to break down the door and I'm afraid he's going to kill my sister," he added. Elizabeth barricaded herself and her siblings in a room, but the plan went wrong because Craig did not react angrily at all. Later, Laura complained via text to Colin about the plan having gone awry. She was focused on Julia telling Colin she had fucked everything up and he should knock some sense into her. Colin's response to his mother was, "Turn off Julia's phone right now. She'll break in 48 hours. Robin and the rest of his family reiterated there was just no way. There have obviously been negative comments that have been made against the character of my brother Craig. I would ask that careful consideration be given prior to believing this negativity. My younger brother was a generous, loving person. It was such a dark and devious situation that it played out, and police said Laura had really poisoned everyone's minds. In an unusual twist, it was decided that all 4 would be tried together at the same time. Everyone turned on each other. Laura's lawyers were pointing the finger at Colin. Colin's were saying it was Laura. Paul's attorney said they didn't know who it was, but it couldn't have been Paul. And it was true, they really had no idea who had actually killed Craig. But there was so much evidence to be presented the prosecution knew it was still a strong case against the four. During the 5-week trial, prosecutors called more than 50 witnesses and introduced nearly 700 pieces of evidence. The theory was that Craig and Laura's 2 youngest children were dropped off that evening, and Laura said she wanted to talk to Craig about the impending move. She somehow lured Craig into the basement where his sons, who had their own key along with Paul, were already waiting. Craig had tried to put up a fight, but he was struck in the face by someone and strangled before he could fight anymore. The defense lawyers all rested their cases without calling anyone. Closing arguments took place on the 1st anniversary of Craig's death, and this only added to an already emotionally charged court case. The jury deliberated for 5 days. Laura Rideout was found guilty of second-degree murder, along with burglary and tampering with evidence. She later received 28 years to life and will first be eligible for parole in 2055. She will be 83 years old. Colin was found guilty of murder and tampering with evidence and also received a 28-year to life sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 when he is 50 years old. Alex was found not guilty of murder, but was found guilty of tampering with evidence and received a 2 to 8-year sentence. The judge called it a premeditated evil and diabolical scheme. This was so much of a punch in the gut for Craig's family. Agnes, Craig's mother, said, "People have asked me how does a mother convince her children to kill their father. My true belief is that you start with a little lie. Then you begin to believe it and eventually you're telling it to your kids." There was an effort to create a narrative for a long time. The lead investigator said that despite the verdict, he was positive Paul was directly involved. He believes Paul was the one that struck Craig in the face, and given the fact that Craig was over 6 foot and 200 pounds, Paul would have been instrumental in getting him up the stairs and into the van. Paul gave a handful of interviews to local media in the days after the verdict and appeared in a Dateline documentary too. He put his house up for sale and moved away from Western New York. The last anyone heard, he lived a short distance away from the prison in Westchester County where Laura is incarcerated. And a couple of years into her sentence, he was still visiting her in prison. "How long do you wait for someone? I'll never turn my back on her or those kids. Hopefully we see a sunset together," he said. He still denies having anything to do with the murder and claims he had no idea who was behind it, saying he missed his old friend dearly and hoped that the truth would one day come out. He even sent an email to a journalist saying in part, investigators also wondered about Paul's wife Jennifer, who had passed away from liver disease, and the timing of her death. They found that it was possible to poison someone slowly and have it look like cirrhosis of the liver. They asked for her case to be reopened and said without a doubt they now had questions about whether Paul could be involved. But the district attorney did not pursue this, and the medical examiner said he was happy with the first examination. Colin also gave an interview saying he was set up to take the fall, directing much of his anger towards Laura. "The thing that angered me the most was her unwillingness to take any kind of responsibility, because whenever I would talk to her she would be, 'I'm sorry this is happening.' It's like, no, this isn't just happening. She did this. She set me up for murder. Ask anyone who knows me. I'm not an impetuous person. I don't do things impulsively or on a whim, but that murder was premeditated. It was deliberate, it was calculated," he said. He claimed his only involvement was cleaning up the blood, but that he was unaware of what had happened and thought maybe at the worst there had been an accident. There is even a free Colin Rideout page. But when his mom Laura filed her appeal, she blamed her sons for everything. Her attorney said, "This is not the plan of a reasonable, intelligent adult. This is more indicative of impetuous violence by sons who thought they were helping their siblings escape an abusive father," followed by a slapdash attempt to cover up their crime. Laura's appeal was denied. Alex Rideout, who was not convicted of murder, was soon freed. Craig and Laura's youngest children went to live with other family members in the Midwest. Julia graduated high school, Elizabeth started college, and Andrew started serving in the United States Marine Corps. This case is the definition of senseless, heartless, and with everyone continuing to point the finger at each other, it makes you ask more questions than you'll ever get answers to, and leaves a family irreparably broken. Craig's mom Agnes said she still talks to Andrew, but everything else is just too fractured. So much has happened. Robin agreed and said, "It is still beyond my comprehension that they thought this was the only way out. The ends didn't justify the means." By all accounts, Craig was a family man through and through. Everything he did was for his family. And how tragic that is when you think about the nature of his death. He gave a lot in his time to his community, always conducting himself with dignity, grace, and leading with kindness. Robin and her family strive to continue to carry themselves in the same way. She said, "There's nothing to be done to bring my brother back. My hope is that he will be remembered as the kind, loving man he was. Heartbreaking case of Heather Elvis. Heather Rell Elvis was born on June 30th, 1993 in Horry County, South Carolina to Terry and Debbie Elvis. She was described as a determined, vibrant, and free-spirited individual with a big personality. Heather enjoyed doing makeup and aspired to pursue it as a career. She was a talented, cheerful, and seemingly happy 20-year-old girl. Heather was very artistic and often shared her thoughts and interests on social media. She was known to be somewhat rebellious, living her life the way she wanted, without caring much about what others thought of her. After graduating from St. James High School in Malls Inlet in 2011, and eager to experience her independence, her parents allowed her to move into an apartment in Myrtle Beach with her best friend Brianna. To support herself while studying cosmetology, Heather had 2 part-time jobs, one at the House of Blues in North Myrtle Beach and the other at a Scottish-themed restaurant called the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach. She had a good job, great friends, and a tight-knit family, and everything in her life seemed to be on track. However, like every 20-year-old girl, she had secrets and things that her family did not know about and would not find out about until it was too late. One day in the summer of 2013, Heather was working her regular shift at the Tilted Kilt when an older man caught her eye. This man was Sidney Mora, the restaurant's maintenance worker. Sidney was a 37-year-old married man with 3 children. His wife Tammy was a 40-year-old stay-at-home mother and a part-time travel agent whom he had been married to since 1997. Sidney owned his own maintenance company and would come to the restaurant to repair things in the kitchen. It was no secret that Heather had a crush on Sidney, even though he was much older, and the two of them would engage in harmless flirting at work. Heather would tell her friend Brianna about their interactions and how smitten she was with this man. Heather, who was also very active on her social media accounts, was open about expressing her feelings towards Sidney. It became clear that Sidney was also attracted to Heather, and the two began a romantic relationship. Sidney would often bring Heather coffee and bagels when she was at work, even on his days off. They would text each other frequently, and the relationship soon became physical. Heather was deeply in love with Sidney. She told her sister how much they loved each other and how they envisioned a future together. Throughout the affair, Heather was aware that Sidney had a wife. However, Sidney had told her that he was in an open marriage and was no longer in love with Tammy. He even claimed that Tammy had a boyfriend of her own and they were only living together for financial reasons and for the sake of the kids. Being young and naive, Heather believed every word. Her friends didn't approve of their relationship because Sidney was 17 years older than Heather. And on top of that, he was a married man. He had been married for 15 years to his wife, 40-year-old Tammy. The affair was not a secret at Heather's workplace, and she would often be teased by her colleagues. One of the girls also phoned the restaurant posing as Tammy, looking for Heather. Heather panicked and left work straight away, thinking that Tammy was going to show up. The affair lasted until September 2013, when Heather tweeted, "Once upon a time an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well," referring to her relationship with Sidney. Tammy found out about the affair, though it's unclear how she discovered it. People close to Heather said that once Tammy became aware of the affair, it was chaotic. Soon after discovering her husband's affair with the young waitress, Tammy called Heather and demanded that she end the relationship. Tammy then put Sidney on the phone, and he proceeded to tell Heather that she meant nothing to him, that it was over, and that she was just someone who spread their legs, among other insults that greatly undermined Heather's confidence and self-worth. Over the next few weeks, she tried to focus on rebuilding herself and directing her sights on her goals and work. Tammy, however, was only just getting started. Tammy forced Sidney to get her name tattooed above his crotch. She would also handcuff him to the bed at night so that he could not sneak out. Over the next few weeks, continued to send nasty texts to Heather, and she even once called Heather 40 times in a single day. Heather believed that taunting Tammy was the best way to deal with the situation, saying things like, "Why are you texting me? You should be worried about your husband." Tammy would take it a step further and send Heather pictures of both Tammy and Sidney in bed together, getting intimate. It was also reported that Sidney texted Heather again, saying that Tammy wasn't entitled to feel the way she did about the affair and act the way she did because she too had a lover. But this turned out to be a lie. They both agreed to call it quits because nothing good was coming from it. Heather, on the other hand, told Sidney that she wanted Tammy to stop calling the restaurant because she lost hours of work and was sent home because Tammy kept calling. Heather and Sydney last saw each other on November 5th after they agreed to end their relationship. Heartbroken, but remaining determined to move on from the situation, Heather continued to work on herself, with those close to her commenting on how she had got her smile back. Things also started to look up for Heather when she was offered a job in a beauty salon, and she was one step closer to her dream job. As for the texts and calls from Tammy, Heather began to get used to them and continued to ignore them, thinking that Tammy would eventually get bored and move on. On November 19th, Sydney and Tammy decided to buy a brand new black Ford F-150 and drive to California with their children to visit Disneyland as a way to rekindle their romance, whereby the trip lasted 3 weeks. Meanwhile, despite Heather's life taking a turn for the better, it would not be long before those around her began to notice that she was gaining weight. So much so that she had to be given a new uniform at work as her usual one no longer fit. Heather went from having a size A cup size on her bra to a size C cup, and she also went from a medium-sized skirt to a large. These are all changes that are typically associated with someone being pregnant. Finally, Heather took a test at work one day, and it came back invalid. It is not known for certain whether or not Heather was pregnant, but it was considered a very strong possibility given the changes in her physical appearance and the fact that she was known to be having a very intimate relationship with Sydney Moore. Her confidence was coming back, and she organized a date with a guy who was closer to her age that she'd been talking to for quite a while. Things were looking good for Heather. On December 17, 2013, Heather went out on a date with Stephen Caldy. They didn't have a specific plan, but wanted to spend some time getting to know each other better. They went out to eat and then drove around looking at Christmas lights, which Heather loved doing during the holidays. Stephen then took Heather to Inlet Mall and taught her how to drive his stick-shift truck. He even took a picture of her trying to drive his car. Heather sent this picture to her best friend, Brianna, and her dad, Terry, who she lived with. The date started at 10 p.m. and ended around 1 a.m. when Stephen dropped Heather off at her apartment. They made plans to meet again the next day for a second date. Regrettably, this marked the last time Heather Elvis was seen. Shortly after returning to her apartment, she received an unexpected call from Sydney Moore, with whom she hadn't been in touch for weeks. During the 4-minute conversation from a payphone, Sydney apologized to Heather, professed his love for her, and revealed that he had left Tammy to be with her. At 1:44 a.m., Heather called her roommate, Brianna, who was away visiting relatives in a distressed state. She informed Brianna about Sydney's confession of love. Sydney initially denied this call until evidence from CCTV footage proved otherwise. Brianna advised Heather to carefully consider the situation and not jeopardize the progress she had made. Heather mentioned she would reflect on it, do some online research, and then try to sleep, although she found it difficult to rest that night. At 2:29 a.m., Heather attempted to contact the number Sydney had called multiple times before, but no one answered. At 3:16 a.m., Heather tried calling Sydney's cell phone, once again with no response. Heather persisted and dialed Sydney's cell phone again, managing to connect this time. The conversation lasted just over 4 minutes, though its content remains unknown. Following the call, Heather drove to Peachtree Boat Landing, a location merely 3 miles away from Sydney and Tammy's residence. Sydney initially denied this call, only admitting to it when presented with Heather's phone records by the police. He claimed to have spoken to her, directing her to cease contacting him. Heather reached Peachtree Boat Landing at 3:38 a.m. and attempted to contact Sydney several times, but received no response. 2 CCTV cameras recorded a vehicle resembling Sydney and Tammy's, moving from their residence towards Peachtree Boat Landing the next evening. Heather's green Dodge Intrepid was discovered parked at Peachtree Landing on the Waccamaw River by a local officer. The authorities questioned Heather's father, Terry, as the vehicle was registered under his name. Upon inspecting the car, they noticed that Heather's keys, ID, purse and phone were missing. Terry was permitted to take the car back home. Despite Terry's repeated attempts to reach Heather, his calls went unanswered. When the police visited Heather's apartment, she was not present and she did not report to work. The search for the missing Heather Elvis had commenced. Sydney and Tammy were suspected of involvement in Heather's case based on texts, phone calls, and public statements. They were arrested on February 21, 2014, for kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and indecent exposure. After spending 11 months in prison, they were released in 2015 on a $100,000 bond each. The murder charges were dismissed in March 2016, and the kidnapping charges were pending. The indecent exposure charges were dropped on June 20, 2016. Sydney's trial for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis began. It was revealed in court that Heather may have been pregnant. Detectives found out that Sydney bought a pregnancy test and cigars at Walmart. Later, Sydney called Heather from a payphone and arranged to meet her. Sydney claimed the pregnancy test was for Tammy as they were trying for a baby. However, security footage showed them cleaning their car, burning rags, and having a receipt for a pregnancy test. The kidnapping charge against Sydney ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. There was no evidence linking Sydney to Heather's murder. In August 2017, Sydney faced trial once more, this time for obstructing justice. He was convicted and given a 10-year prison sentence. Additionally, the prosecution intended to retry Sydney for kidnapping at a later date. In October 2018, Tammy was put on trial for kidnapping and conspiracy. 5 years after Heather's disappearance, it was revealed during the trial that Tammy was angry about her husband's affair with Heather, especially when rumors suggested that Heather might have been pregnant in December 2013. A family friend, Donald DeMarino, testified that he saw an image of Heather on Tammy's phone at a family gathering after Heather disappeared. According to Donald, Heather in the image did not seem able to move or speak, causing him distress and leading him to leave the event. Although the image was not shown in court and few details were provided, the prosecution's evidence, including this testimony, convinced the jury to find Tammy guilty in less than 2 hours. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison for both charges, with the possibility of parole after a set period. To this day, they have not revealed what occurred to Heather Elvis on that night in December 2013. Both have been attempting to challenge their convictions for years, claiming their innocence, but without success. Currently, Sydney, aged 47, is imprisoned at the high-security Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville, with an expected release date of March 31, 2044. Tammy, aged 50, is at the medium-security Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, with an anticipated release date of May 9, 2043. Heather Elvis has never been found, and a tribute garden has been set up at Peachtree Boat Landing in dedication to her. Heather's disappearance left a void in the lives of her family and friends, and their pain, unanswered questions, and desire for closure became part of the story of Myrtle Beach. The community came together in search efforts and vigils, united by hope for answers. Heather's story touched hearts beyond the coastal town, highlighting the challenges of love and relationships. As we honor Heather Elise Elvis, let her memory remind us of life's fragility and the need for compassion and understanding. On September 29, 2018, Daniel Attaway, a 24-year-old, returned to his home on Hartage Farm Drive in Marietta, Georgia. To his horror, he discovered his father, Wayne Attaway, lying lifeless on the floor. Overwhelmed with panic, Daniel immediately dialed 911 to report the tragic incident. Wayne, known for his peaceful nature, had fallen victim to a brutal attack in broad daylight within their quiet neighborhood. The entire town was shaken by this shocking event, unable to comprehend the true nature of Wayne's fate. As the details of that fateful September day unfolded, Wayne's family found themselves consumed by darkness. They were left wondering who could have committed such a heinous act against a simple man like Wayne. Marietta, a city in Cobb County, Georgia, is renowned for its strong sense of community and exceptional educational opportunities. With abundant green spaces, convenient access to amenities, and a diverse range of shopping and dining options, Marietta is often considered one of the best places to reside. However, beneath its pleasant facade, Marietta harbors a darker side. The city experiences higher rates of violent crime compared to many other cities in the United States, necessitating constant vigilance among its residents. The unresolved case of Wayne Attaway's tragic fate in 2018 continues to haunt the people of Marietta. Wayne, born on November 7, 1958, in Box Springs, Talbot County, Georgia, was the son of Clara and George Walden Attaway. Throughout his life, he was affectionately known as Wayne. Growing up with his sisters Beverly, Nancy, and Sylvia, Wayne developed a strong bond with his siblings, becoming a loving brother. During the 1970s, Wayne attended Pacelli Vikings Catholic High School in Columbus, Georgia, where he actively participated in football. Wayne completed his Bachelor of Science in Industrial Management from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1981. Shortly after, he joined Millikan in LaGrange, Georgia. In 1982, Wayne tied the knot with Carolyn Wojtysiak, whom he had met the previous year. Wayne's career took him to Atlanta in 1988, where he secured a position at Frito-Lay. Later, he ventured into the field of construction with P.J. Rowe Construction in Marietta. Wayne and Carolyn's married life flourished, and they were blessed with a daughter named Morgan on June 5, 1989. During this period, Wayne harbored aspirations of starting his own company, which eventually led to the formation of Woolard Ottman Construction Incorporation on March 25, 1992. Wayne, along with his friends Scott Manus and Loris Woolard, established this commercial general contracting partnership. Wayne served as the vice president, while Loris held the position of president and Scott became the vice president and secretary. As Wayne thrived in his new professional endeavor, he and Carolyn decided to expand their family further. On April 24, 1994, they welcomed their second child, a son named Daniel. Despite his demanding work schedule, Wayne always prioritized his children and fulfilled his responsibilities diligently. In 1995, Wayne received a Catholic baptism at St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Marietta, Georgia. Although Wayne's business initially operated on Wiley Road in Marietta, it relocated to White Circle on March 29, 2000 due to its growth and expansion. Wayne's dedication and contributions played a significant role in the success of the company over the years. By 2018, with Daniel and Morgan having reached adulthood, Wayne found more leisure time to indulge in various hobbies. He developed a passion for cowboy shooting, carpentry, motorcycle riding, horseback riding, hiking, as well as water and snow skiing. Wayne, a man in his late 50s, was leading a peaceful life in 2018 with his family at his residence on 570 Hardage Farm Drive in Marietta. However, tragedy struck on Saturday, September 29, 2018, when Wayne's family was away and he was alone at home. Upon his son Daniel's return at around 4:30 p.m., he made a shocking discovery. His father, Wayne, lying motionless on the floor, covered in blood. Daniel, in a state of panic, sought help from his neighbors and then called his mother, Carolyn, who did not answer. Subsequently, Daniel dialed 911 and reported the distressing situation to the operator. Responding promptly, officers from the Marietta Police Department arrived at the scene at 4:31 p.m. Daniel guided them to the basement where Wayne's lifeless body was found. The victim, identified as 59-year-old Douglas Wayne Attaway, had sustained 2 gunshot wounds, one in the upper right shoulder and another in the head. Detectives, upon assessing the gruesome scene, wasted no time in initiating their investigation. The investigation began with the detectives questioning the neighbors and Wayne's family members in order to gather any information or potential witnesses related to the disturbing incident. Unfortunately, no one had witnessed anything suspicious near Wayne's residence. However, due to Daniel's prior notification to the neighbors about Wayne's death and the presence of numerous police vehicles, news of the tragic event quickly spread throughout the Hardage Farm Drive neighborhood. This caused concern among the residents, as police presence was uncommon in the area. Officer Chuck McPhillamy, assigned to the case, reassured the residents that Wayne's murder was an isolated incident and there was no need for alarm. Over the next 2 days, the detectives meticulously searched the crime scene and interviewed the neighborhood, hoping to uncover any clues or potential suspects. Wayne's family members were interviewed separately to determine if they had any suspicions or if Wayne had any conflicts with anyone. However, no names were mentioned during these questioning sessions. During the search of the Attaway home, the detectives made a significant discovery. The 6-hour Model P250, a handgun, was missing from the family's collection of weapons. The neighbors informed the detectives that Wayne's brutal murder had deeply shaken the peaceful and affluent Hardage Farm community. They described Wayne as a longtime resident of Marietta, well known and respected by all. They believed that Wayne, a calm individual, had no enemies and was likely shot by an unknown intruder. The detectives then examined the surveillance systems of Wayne's neighbors, hoping to find any valuable clues and urged them to report any information related to the case to the Marietta police investigators. Despite the progress made by the detectives, a crucial piece of information from Wayne's family would ultimately crack the case wide open. A few days following Wayne's murder, the killer himself admitted his guilt to Wayne's family. The confession was made by Daniel, who revealed to his mother Carolyn that he and Wayne had been experiencing a strained relationship and had been frequently arguing. The breaking point for Daniel came when Wayne issued him an ultimatum, intensifying the tension between them. Daniel, who had a passion for painting and often shared his artwork on social media, had recently taken an interest in welding and wanted to improve his skills in that area. However, Wayne's demand that Daniel either find a job or leave the house infuriated him, leading to a moment of uncontrollable rage. On the afternoon of September 29, 2018, when Carolyn and Morgan were not at home, Daniel retrieved a handgun from the family's collection and shot his father in the shoulder and then between the eyes, causing Wayne's untimely demise. After committing this heinous act, Daniel meticulously crafted a false narrative. He contacted emergency services and fabricated a story, portraying himself as innocent. He maintained this deceit when speaking to the officers at the crime scene, insinuating that an unknown intruder was responsible for the murder. Carolyn and Morgan were left in a state of utter shock and despair upon hearing Daniel's confession, which transformed their already sorrowful lives into a grim reality. Daniel expressed remorse and shame for his actions and ultimately decided to surrender himself to the authorities. While Daniel's confession provided substantial evidence linking him to his father's murder, the detectives also uncovered compelling proof. They discovered that Wayne had been shot with a 9mm handgun, and a weapon matching this description was found in the woods near a creek bed, approximately 100 yards away from the family's residence. The Sig Sauer Model P-250 was identified as the murder weapon, which happened to be missing from the Attaway family's gun collection during the initial search of their home. Wayne had purchased the gun himself, but Daniel's name was also on the receipt. To further investigate, the detectives conducted a gunshot residue test on Daniel, which came back positive, confirming the presence of residue on his clothes. By October 1, 2018, the investigators had gathered enough evidence to link Daniel to Wayne's murder. Consequently, on October 2, 2018, Daniel Walden Attaway, the son of the deceased Wayne Attaway, was charged and arrested at 290 Lemon Street in Marietta, Georgia. He faced charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault with intent to commit murder, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Daniel was held without bond at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center, awaiting his trial. Wayne's death deeply affected Carolyn, leaving her devastated. Just a few weeks prior, on September 18, 2018, she and Wayne had celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary. The realization that her own son had shattered their once happy family was unimaginable. With a heavy heart, Carolyn and Morgan organized a prayer service at Mays Ward Dobbins Funeral Home on October 5, 2018, where Wayne's friends and family gathered to remember and honor him. On October 6, 2018 at 12 noon, a funeral service was held for Wayne at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Marietta. He was laid to rest at Kennesaw Memorial Park in Marietta, Cobb County. Daniel Attaway pleaded not guilty and sought the legal representation of Marietta criminal defense attorney Mazzy Mosloom. Although Mazzy hadn't spent much time with Daniel yet, he believed that Daniel appeared to be a decent young man. When inquired about the case, Mazzy mentioned that it was premature to provide any specific comments on the case details. However, he noted that not guilty pleas were common in cases of this nature. On October 9, 2018, Mazzy Mosloom, acting as Daniel's attorney, disclosed that an initial hearing for Daniel Walden Attaway was set for November 29, 2018. Mazzy emphasized that his primary objective during the hearing would be to secure additional evidence beyond what was outlined in the arrest warrant. Several hearings were conducted for Daniel's case in the subsequent days, but due to Daniel's uncooperative conduct, a verdict remained elusive. Throughout his time in custody and the subsequent hearings, Daniel's behavior took a concerning turn. As the trial scheduled for 2021 approached, Daniel was declared mentally incompetent. In the same year, Daniel was transferred from Cobb County Jail to Decatur Hospital for a psychological assessment. Although the results of the latest evaluation were presented to the court on April 12, 2021, the reports were sealed. The specifics were not disclosed to the public. Subsequently, Daniel was deemed competent to stand trial by state psychologists. According to the state doctors, they did not believe that Daniel's criminal responsibility was in question, asserting that he was legally sane and capable of proceeding with the trial. Mazzy, Daniel's attorney, mentioned that he would have an independent expert review the state's conclusions. He highlighted that since competency was a dynamic concept, Daniel could proceed with the trial as long as he adhered to his medication regimen and did not experience adverse reactions. Another year passed without a verdict, and by 2022 Daniel had spent 3.5 years in custody at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center. On March 16, 2022, Daniel Walden Attaway pleaded guilty but mentally ill to one count of malice murder in the killing of his father, Douglas Wayne Attaway, in September 2018. Daniel, who was 27 years old at the time, received a 50-year sentence, with 25 years to be served in prison and the remaining 25 years on probation. This was part of his plea agreement, which also required him to undergo mental health supervision throughout his entire time in custody and probation. The announcement of Daniel's sentencing was made public on Friday, March 18, 2022, by Cobb County District Attorney Flynn Brody Jr. through a news release. Despite this significant development, Wayne's family, consisting of Carolyn and Morgan, chose not to comment on the verdict. They were already in the process of healing and did not want to revisit anything that would reopen old wounds. Their focus was on moving forward and building a better future as the incident had deeply affected their lives. Wayne's case was undeniably tragic, as Daniel's irrational actions had completely altered the trajectory of their family's life. Carolyn, now accepting the reality, strives each day to make it better than the last. On her social media platforms, she shares her most cherished memories of Wayne with her loved ones. Robert William Fisher was born on April 13, 1961 in Brooklyn, New York. His father, William Fisher, worked as a banker while his mother, Jan Howell, was a homemaker. Robert was the eldest of 3 siblings, having 2 younger sisters with whom he shared a close bond, particularly with his youngest sister, with whom he was like best friends. In 1976, Robert faced a significant upheaval in his family when his parents divorced. His mother cited his father's controlling behavior as the primary reason for their separation. Unlike his sisters, Robert was deeply affected by the divorce. As the eldest, he had spent the most time with both parents together, making the split especially hard for him to understand and cope with. Fisher enlisted in the United States Navy and attempted to become part of the SEALs but was not successful. He was an avid outdoorsman, hunter, and fisherman. Eventually, in 1987, he met Mary Cooper, who would become the love of his life. They got married and Robert began working various jobs, although he did not have a specific career path. At one point, he worked as a firefighter but had to quit due to a back injury. He later trained in other fields, including surgical catheters, and ultimately became a respiratory therapist. After marrying Mary, they settled in Scottsdale, Arizona, buying a house for $80,000 to start their family. Mary Cooper was a devoted homemaker and deeply religious, sharing her faith with Robert. Both were raised in Christian households and were active members of their church community. In 1991, their first daughter, Brittany, was born, followed by their son, Bobby. The Fishers were a close-knit family, raising their children with strong Christian values. Mary was known to be extremely loving and dedicated to her children, who were bright and excelled in school and sports. Brittany, in particular, stood out for her academic achievements and involvement in activities like gymnastics and soccer. But Robert was described as a cruel and distant control freak toward his family. He and his wife often argued about sex and money, with Mary taking a job she referred to as a security fund to her friends. Fisher once turned a garden hose on Mary for speaking out of turn. He was embarrassed that his son Bobby didn't enjoy hunting or fishing, and once tried to teach him and his daughter Brittany to swim by throwing them off a boat. Fisher imposed strict rules at home, insisting that the walls be painted only white and allowing only a few pictures to be hung. Several times, Mary's mother made special things, like quilts, but Mary was not allowed to hang them up. She had to store them in the closet. Despite these behaviors, Fisher tried to maintain an image as a devoted family man. However, the Fisher family's seemingly perfect life took a devastating turn in April 2001. On the morning of April 10, 2001, at around 8:30 a.m., emergency services began receiving multiple calls about a house fire in their neighborhood. The house in question belonged to the Fishers. Initially, it was believed that the family might have been inside, and the fire was possibly caused by a gas leak or a stove left on. Upon extinguishing the fire, the bodies of Mary, Brittany, and Bobby were found in their beds, but Robert was missing. This led to an intense search for him, initially hoping he was unaware of the tragedy. However, as hours turned into days and then weeks, Robert Fisher's disappearance made him the prime suspect in the investigation. Neighbors reported hearing a loud argument between Mary and Robert the night before the fire, around 10:30 p.m. This was not unusual, as their arguments had become a regular occurrence. Years earlier, Robert had suffered a back injury and sought massages to alleviate the pain. While Mary was away on a retreat with the children, Robert allegedly visited a place of prostitution or met with a woman he had been seeing. This incident caused significant guilt for Robert, a devout Christian, and he eventually confessed to Mary. The confession led to a major crisis in their marriage, but they decided to attend counseling through their church in an attempt to mend their relationship. Despite counseling, the arguments continued, Neighbors noted that Mary was often the louder one during these fights, frequently expressing her frustration and pain over the betrayal. The investigation revealed that Robert was captured on a surveillance camera at a nearby ATM at 10:45 p.m. on the night of the fire, withdrawing $280. The footage also showed his Toyota 4Runner in the background. The amount withdrawn was considered the maximum allowed at that time, leading to speculation about his motives. The discovery of this withdrawal, coupled with the violent nature of the crime scene, pointed towards Robert Fisher as the main suspect. Despite an extensive manhunt, Robert Fisher remains a fugitive and his whereabouts are unknown. The tragic events left the Fisher family shattered and the community continues to seek justice for Mary, Brittany, and Bobby. When the autopsies were performed on the charred bodies of Mary and her 2 children, they found that Mary had been injured in 2 ways. Her throat had been slashed, nearly decapitating her, and she had been shot in the head. The children's throats had also been cut, nearly decapitating them as well. This happened, they say, on the night the neighbors heard the argument. Many believe that the screams the neighbors heard were not from the fight itself, but from the actual moment of the murders. The bodies were found in the morning, about 10 hours after they had been killed, when the house exploded. How did the house explode? Investigators say that a gas line was left open in the house's oven. A lit candle was placed in the hallway, and over those 10 hours as the house filled with gas, it eventually reached the candle, causing the explosion. Robert became the main suspect, especially because he disappeared after the incident and never reappeared, making it obvious to the police that he was involved. Many thought that with his knowledge as a firefighter and his work in mechanics, he believed there would be no evidence left to incriminate him. They assumed he might have planned to make it seem like he was also inside the house, and due to the fire's intensity, his body wouldn't be found. This, they thought, was his way of escaping the situation. But why would he murder his own family? There are many theories, but the most focused one in this case is that he didn't want to allow a divorce from Mary. As I mentioned earlier, Robert experienced his parents' divorce when he was very young, which hit him very hard. Friends who knew him said he often mentioned he would never let his children go through what he had endured. In the days leading up to the incident, Robert had been unfaithful to Mary, and although she forgave him once, he cheated again. Mary, realizing this, decided it was enough and sought a divorce. Some friends mentioned that just days before, Mary had explained her plans to divorce Robert, and that she was determined to go through with it. This decision did not sit well with Robert, who didn't want his children to experience the trauma of divorce. This led him to act as he did, believing that if he couldn't have Mary and his children, no one else could. Regarding Robert's personality, many would think he was a normal man with a wonderful family life, but that wasn't the case. Over time, some of his peculiar behaviors became apparent. For instance, he had a strange and intense passion for hunting. Friends recounted that once, after killing an animal during a hunt, he smeared its blood all over his face and body in a bizarre manner. On another occasion, while fishing, he reportedly dived into the water with a knife in his mouth and began stabbing fish to catch them, which was quite unusual. Additionally, he struggled with the disappointment of not being able to join the firefighters or the U.S. Navy due to a back problem, which seemed to weigh heavily on him. Moreover, those who knew him more intimately spoke of his controlling nature. Mary had confided in her mother-in-law that Robert's controlling behavior made her feel very strange and uncomfortable. His mother acknowledged that she had divorced Robert's father for similar reasons, as he had been equally controlling. There were also reports of Robert being extremely harsh with his children, pushing them to share his passion for hunting and forcing them to learn about and handle firearms. These behaviors painted a picture of a man with deep-seated issues, ultimately leading to the tragic events that unfolded. On one occasion, while hunting, he approached a family having a picnic and fired shots into the air to scare them. Several years before his wife and children were murdered, Fisher shot a stray pit bull. He claimed that he shot it because it attacked his Labrador retriever, but police maintained that he orchestrated the encounter because he wanted to shoot the dog. Fisher had been an active participant in the Scottsdale Baptist Church's men's ministry, but in contrast to Mary, had begun to withdraw from church activities a few months prior to the murders. According to some of Fisher's friends, Fisher spoke of committing suicide around 1998 when he despaired over the condition of his marriage. In 1998, the Fishers went to the senior pastor for marital counseling. Robert gradually distanced himself from the marriage counseling provided by the church, which contributed to the deterioration of his marriage. To many, they appeared to be a perfect family, especially in front of the church. Mary's father even believed for a long time that Robert was completely innocent because he was always so good with the kids and portrayed the image of a wonderful father. Mary never shared the troubles she faced in her marriage with her father. He couldn't comprehend that Robert could harm his wife and children, believing instead that Robert had been kidnapped. When the police presented evidence, Mary's father was in disbelief but began seeking justice for his daughter. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years after the incident without seeing justice served. Further investigation revealed that Robert had multiple facets to his personality, suggesting a significant personality disorder. In some home videos, he is seen instructing his daughter to smile more, be very happy, then act scared and pull her hair. His behavior is peculiar, and at one point, he orders Mary to turn off the camera, looking at her harshly. In another disturbing video, he has his children parade around with firearms, almost pointing one at Mary to make her turn off the camera. These clues led the police to consider Robert Fisher the sole person of interest, eventually placing him on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. By April 20th of the same year, several days after the incident, his Toyota truck was found in the National Forest where he was seen withdrawing money from an ATM. Near the passenger door, a large pile of human excrement was discovered, leading investigators to believe he was hiding in the area, possibly in one of the many caves. Reports of sightings began to surface, with one couple claiming they saw him walking along young road days before the truck was found. Some speculated he had hidden in a cave and perished, while others found it odd that his beloved dog, Blue, stayed by the truck for about 5 days without food or water. This led to confusion about why Robert left the dog there and whether it indicated anything about his state of mind or plans. On July 19th, an official arrest warrant was issued for Robert Fisher on charges of first-degree murder and arson. A $100,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture, with many believing he was alive and living under a new identity. Descriptions of Robert emphasized his average appearance, a white male with light eyes and blonde hair. However, his distinctive walk due to back surgery, a surgery scar, and a gold crown on one of his teeth could help identify him. The public was warned that Fisher was considered armed and dangerous. The police also released age-progressed images to show how he might look now, aiding the public in identifying him. The police began to question whether Robert Fisher had planned his actions premeditatedly, but they discovered that it might not have been the case. His actions suggested a mix of surprise and a determined effort to flee and avoid capture. A truck driver reported helping a man who closely resembled Robert Fisher after the man's car broke down. Another testimony came from a woman who saw a man resembling Fisher. While she went to the bathroom, the man ordered a drink and stared at the fireplace for a long time. On the same night, another woman arrived at a hostel, asking for shelter because her boyfriend had just left her. The two women described the man similarly, raising suspicions that someone might have helped him escape, possibly a lover. Despite all this, the police doubted that Fisher could survive long-term in the wilderness, even though he enjoyed hunting and fishing. They considered the possibility of suicide a common outcome for those who commit such crimes against their families. However, nobody was found, leading many to believe he might be living in South America. Some think he might be in Mexico, where he could live off cash without needing a credit card, while others suggest he might be in Brazil using his medical knowledge. In 2001, a man called a program called Most Wanted, claiming to be Robert Fisher, saying they would never find him. The police doubted the call's authenticity. In 2004, a man in Canada with a striking resemblance to Fisher was detained. When Robert's former neighbor saw him, he was convinced it was Fisher. The man had the same scar on his back and a missing gold tooth. However, fingerprint analysis proved it wasn't him. Despite these setbacks, the police continue to receive numerous sightings, but only a few have been somewhat credible. They urge anyone who sees someone resembling Robert Fisher to contact the authorities immediately, especially in Latin America, where he might be hiding. Celine Fegat was born on May 23, 1976 in the French town of Besançon. It was a quiet and peaceful place, not far from the Swiss border. Celine grew up in a loving family with her parents, 2 brothers, and a sister. Her dad was a farmer, so she and her siblings spent a lot of time outside, helping him keep the farm running. At school, Celine was active in sports and had many friends. When she was 14, her parents took her to nearby Britain and she absolutely loved it. From that point on, she started thinking about moving there someday. She decided to pursue an education that would allow her to work in the hotel business, inspired by her cousin who was a hotel manager in the UK. After finishing school, enrolled in a local university to study accounting. She also continued visiting her cousin in England whenever she could. One summer, he helped her get a job at a hotel, and she spent a few months working there before returning home. At the end of 1995, when Celine was 19, she decided to travel to Britain again for Christmas. At that time of year, public trains in France were experiencing disruptions, so her parents asked a family friend, a truck driver, for help. He was delivering cargo to England and agreed to give her a ride to a town called Folkestone. From there, Celine planned to travel to Fordingbridge, a town about 150 miles or 250 kilometers away, where her cousin lived. On December 18th, left home, planning to reach her cousin's hotel by that evening. Her parents were expecting a call from her to let them know she had arrived safely. But as the evening stretched on, there was no word from Celine. She didn't have a mobile phone, so all her family could do was just wait and hope she would make it to the hotel eventually. Later that night, they finally got a call, but it wasn't Celine. It was her cousin. He told them she still hadn't arrived and asked if something had changed in her plans. Celine's parents grew even more worried and, with no other options, decided to contact the police. French authorities quickly reached out to their British colleagues, who immediately launched a search for the missing woman. Their first step was to speak with Celine's parents, who traveled to England to assist in the investigation. They told them about a family friend, a truck driver, who had agreed to give Celine a ride to Britain. The police tracked him down and he confirmed that he had dropped her off in Folkestone. After that, he had to head in a different direction. While they were at the truck stop, the driver met another French trucker who was heading to a town called Newbury, about an hour's drive from Celine's cousin's hotel. This second driver agreed to give Celine a lift, and investigators managed to locate him as well. He told the police he had dropped Celine off at a truck stop in Newbury. She had tried using a payphone there to call her cousin and ask him to pick her up, but for some reason she couldn't get through. By that time, it was already 4:30 p.m. The driver told Celine she could take a train to her cousin's town, but there was a problem. The nearest station was a few dozen miles away, and he couldn't take her there since he had to deliver his cargo in a different direction. He still wanted to help, so he started asking other truckers in the parking lot if anyone could give Celine a ride. The first driver he asked turned him down, saying he was planning to rest before his next trip. But the second trucker agreed. He said he was heading to Salisbury, just about a 30-minute drive from Celine's cousin's town. He even mentioned she could probably catch an 8 p.m. bus from there. With no other options left, Celine went with the third driver, and that's where her trail disappeared. Detectives tried to track this man down, but they didn't have enough solid information to identify him. The second driver, who had handed her over, couldn't recall the license plate number and only remembered that the truck was a white Mercedes. He also provided a description of the man. He was around 35 years old, had short blonde hair and a beard. The second driver also mentioned that something about this man struck him as suspicious. There was something unsettling about his behavior, but he still let Celine go with him because, at that point, she simply had no other choice. Police began to suspect that the third driver might have been involved in Celine's disappearance. Using the witness's description, they created a composite sketch and shared it with the local media. As for the first two drivers, investigators thoroughly checked their alibis and found solid evidence proving they had been in other locations at the time. Detectives soon uncovered a troubling detail that made them even more suspicious of the third driver. Remember how he told Celine she could catch an evening bus to her cousin's town from Salisbury? Well, it turned out that no such bus existed. Investigators wasted no time getting the word out about Celine's disappearance. They shared her story along with a suspect's composite sketch through newspapers and TV. The case quickly grabbed national attention in both Britain and France. It was just days before Christmas, and the disappearance of a young woman during the holiday season struck a chord with the public. On top of that, there were fears that Celine might have fallen victim to a serial killer. Over the past 2 years, several young women had been murdered in the same area. Police believed these cases were linked to a single perpetrator, and now they were worried Celine's disappearance could be connected to him. As a result, the local police launched a full-scale search. Over 100 officers were assigned to the case, along with helicopters and even an airplane to scan the area from above. They concentrated their efforts along the route the third driver was believed to have taken with Celine. But despite all their efforts, they found no trace of her. Unfortunately, the first week of the search yielded no results. Both the police and Celine's family made numerous public appeals, urging anyone who might know something about her whereabouts or the driver himself to come forward. But every lead they followed quickly turned into a dead end. This went on for over a week until the morning of December 29th, when police received a chilling call. A man driving near the town of Worcester had pulled over to adjust his windshield wipers. While walking along the roadside, he noticed something odd partially covered by snow. Curious, he went closer and, to his horror, realized it was a human body. Shaken, he immediately rushed home and called the police. Officers arrived at the scene and found the body of a young woman, but at first they couldn't identify her. Initially, they thought it might be the remains of a local woman who had disappeared after leaving a nightclub, but the theory was quickly ruled out. It wasn't until the following day, December 30th, that police confirmed the body was Celine's. Her cousin was brought in to identify her, sparing her parents the heartbreaking task of doing it themselves. Police quickly noticed one important detail. The highway where Celine's body was found was almost in the opposite direction of where she had been heading. This only strengthened their theory that the truck driver who had given her a ride was likely responsible for her murder. All of Celine's clothing and personal belongings were missing, and officers found no trace of them near the site where her body was discovered. The autopsy revealed multiple bruises and abrasions consistent with heavy blows, as well as evidence of strangulation. Medical examiners also found signs of SA on Celine's body, but there was no biological material that could lead them to the perpetrator. One chilling detail stood out. The examiners determined that Celine's body had likely been left by the roadside only about 24 hours before it was found. With 11 days having passed since her disappearance, detectives speculated that the killer may have kept her alive for most of that time or even transported her body with him. The second driver who had helped Celine mentioned that the suspect's truck was equipped with an industrial freezer, which suggested the killer could have preserved her body at low temperatures for days. Despite all this, the police still had no solid leads on the driver's identity. However, a conversation with Celine's parents revealed an intriguing detail. She had been carrying 2 bottles of champagne as Christmas gifts. These, along with all her other belongings, were never found. It seemed likely that the killer had taken them, which gave investigators a potential new angle to explore. This champagne was a specific French brand that wasn't sold in Britain, making those 2 bottles completely unique in the country. Police decided to use this as leverage and sent information about the bottles to the media, along with photos of identical champagne. They hoped that the perpetrator might have shown them to someone or even shared them with friends or family. But unfortunately, this lead also went nowhere. Without any other leads in hand, investigators decided to take an unprecedented step. Despite the absence of the perpetrator's DNA on the victim's body, in early January of the following year, they initiated the first mass DNA collection in Britain's history. The police focused their efforts on drivers of Mercedes trucks and similar models. This process took over a month, and detectives managed to test more than 5,000 drivers. Most of them willingly provided their samples, but there were some who refused. Investigators put them on a separate list for further scrutiny, thinking that one of those individuals might be the killer. Meanwhile, Celine's case continued to gain widespread attention in both British and French media. The police received thousands of tips and leads, but unfortunately, none of them brought the detectives any closer to catching the killer. This continued until mid-February when one tip finally caught the investigators' attention. A man called the police after seeing the suspect's sketch on the news and said it looked strikingly similar to one of his co-workers, a 36-year-old truck driver named Stuart Little. He also mentioned that Stuart drove a Mercedes truck with a refrigeration unit. This lead prompted detectives to start digging into Stuart's background. The first thing they uncovered was Stuart's extensive criminal history, though it consisted of non-violent offenses. Next, they decided to approach him carefully and ask for a DNA sample, presenting it as a routine part of their investigation involving thousands of drivers across Britain. However, Stuart refused to provide a sample, which only deepened their suspicions. After several more attempts to persuade him, though, Stuart eventually gave in and agreed to the test. As soon as they had his DNA, the police secured a warrant to search his truck. That's when they found their first major evidence: traces of blood on the mattress in the sleeping area and in other parts of the cab. Testing confirmed it was Celine's blood, and that was enough for an arrest. The police also obtained a warrant to search Stuart's house. In his garage, they discovered Celine's personal belongings, the ones she had with her when she disappeared. But that wasn't all. Investigators noticed something odd about Stuart's tachograph, the device truck drivers are required to use by law to track their driving hours. It appeared that on the day Celine's body was dumped, Stuart had deliberately concealed information about his movements. However, he made a mistake. After disposing of the body, he resumed work without filling in the missing data. This created a suspicious gap in his driving log, which detectives believed corresponded to the time he transported Celine's body to the roadside. During his first interrogation, Stewart denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he had never even picked up Celine. But when police brought in the other driver, who identified Stewart in a lineup, his story changed. He now admitted to giving Celine a ride and claimed they had consensual intercourse. As for her belongings found in his garage, Stewart insisted she had simply forgotten them when he dropped her off. Naturally, investigators weren't quick to believe Stewart's story. They continued searching for evidence and soon found a witness who had seen him the day before Celine's body was discovered. The witness spotted Stewart near a warehouse about 50 miles from where the body was found. He was seen starting a fire next to his truck, and it appeared he was burning something. When police confronted Stewart about this, he claimed he'd started the fire to warm up his truck brakes, which had supposedly frozen due to the weather. Officers decided to search the area near the warehouse, and it didn't take long for them to find something disturbing. Underneath a fence, they discovered Celine's underwear. It was stained with her blood. Piecing together all the evidence, investigators came up with the most likely timeline of events. When Stewart picked up Celine, he drove to a secluded area where he assaulted and killed her. Based on the blood evidence found in his truck, they believe Stewart kept her body on the lower bunk in his cab for 10 days while continuing to make deliveries as if nothing had happened. Shockingly, just a week after the murder, Stewart went home to celebrate Christmas with his wife and children, while Celine's body remained just a few yards away in his truck. At some point, he decided to dispose of the body. Investigators found receipts showing Stewart had purchased a shovel, an axe, and a saw, likely with the intention of dismembering her remains. However, for some reason, he abandoned that plan and simply left her body near the roadside. Detectives soon uncovered another chilling detail. The day after Christmas, Stewart gave those 2 bottles of rare French champagne to an acquaintance as a gift. When detectives questioned him about it, Stewart claimed he'd bought the bottles from another French truck driver, but investigators didn't believe a word of it. On top of that, they uncovered another intriguing detail. Stewart had always worn a beard, but he completely shaved it off after the murder, right around the time the suspect's sketch started appearing in the news. They also figured out why Celine couldn't reach her cousin when she tried to call him from a payphone. It turned out that the UK had recently changed its phone codes, and Celine had his number written down with the old code in her notebook. Unaware of this update, she dialed the outdated number and her call never went through. For Stewart's family, friends, and co-workers, these revelations were a complete shock. To them, he had always seemed like a devoted family man and a reliable friend. At first, many even refused to believe he could have been involved. But as the media revealed the mounting evidence against him, they had no choice but to face the horrifying truth of who Stewart really was. Stewart's trial began in October of that year, and despite the mountain of evidence against him, he stuck to his story, denying everything. But the jury didn't need long to deliberate. They unanimously found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving at least 20 years. Soon after his sentencing, Stewart tried to appeal the verdict, claiming that the high-profile nature of the case had biased the jury, preventing him from receiving a fair trial. However, the appeals court rejected his claims. In 2006, Stewart made another attempt to have his sentence reviewed, but once again, his appeal was denied. 10 years later, in 2016, Stewart became eligible for parole, but his request was denied. The reason was clear. Even after spending 2 decades in prison, he still refused to admit to the crime and maintained his innocence. The judge also voiced concerns that Stewart remained a danger to society. As of now, Stewart remains behind bars, with little chance of being released anytime soon. It's worth mentioning that Stewart was ultimately ruled out as a suspect in the other murders I mentioned earlier. Those crimes turned out to be the work of another truck driver who was arrested in late 1997. While prosecutors linked him to just 2 murders, they still believe he might be responsible for several other unsolved cases. As for Stewart, investigators also suspected that Celine might not have been his only victim. However, after all these years, no evidence has been found to connect him to any other crimes. Case of Anna Maria Wilson. In May 2022, the cycling community was shocked by the shocking murder of rising star Anna. This is the result of jealousy, betrayal, and obsession. At the heart of the case was a volatile love triangle, her affair with Colin Strickland and his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. What really happened that night in Austin, Texas, and what drove Anna to her tragic end? The case remains a chilling exploration of human emotions and how they can lead to acts of cruelty. From Anna's tragedy to the dramatic international manhunt, the case not only left a lasting impression, but also raised urgent questions about trust and justice. Anna Mariah Wilson was born on May 18, 1996 in Little Tony, New Hampshire. Her mother, Karen Wilson, was a cycling instructor, and her father, Eric Wilson, was a member of the U.S. ski team in 1977. With such parents, she was destined to make a career as an athlete. The family moved to Kirby, Vermont, a picturesque area with large mountains, ski resorts, and first-class preparatory schools specializing in training young athletes. Her father worked as a ski racing instructor at Burke Mountain Academy. At a young age, both Anna and her brother Matthew Wilson attended college where their father worked. Both were already experienced skiers, much to the delight of their parents, especially Anna. She seemed to have inherited the sporting genes passed on to her by her parents. She was not only a talented skier, but also captain of football team and a promising gravel racer. This was where her passion lay. For a short period of time, she not only participated in competitions, but also won races with amazing speed. Unfortunately, her bright future was destined to be cut short. On May 11, 2022, at about 10 p.m. in Austin, Texas, during a friend's 25th birthday celebration, Anna was found bleeding from her head, unconscious, and not breathing in the bathroom. It was not a freak accident nor an attempt to harm herself. She had been attacked twice in the head and once in the chest. In complete shock, her friend immediately called 911, trying to save Anna's life. First responders arrived on the scene as quickly as they could and immediately began performing CPR. But it wasn't long before they gave up. It was too late. Anna's fight for life was over. But what happened? What drove the attacker to so brutally take her life? Let's go back in time. In 2019, Anna graduated from Dortmund University with a degree in engineering. However, she wasn't planning on making a career as an engineer. She dreamed with all her heart of proving herself in sports. Within 2 years, she became a famous cyclist, rising up the rankings and sharing podiums with already established professional cyclists. She used to work at a company, but she soon quit to devote herself to cycling. Her career path consisted solely of training and competing. Anna became more famous and began to integrate more into the community of athletes and cyclists. She had many friends and new sponsors. One such person was Colin Strickland, a 30-year-old experienced cyclist. He had a common sponsor with Anna. In October 2021, Anna visited Austin, Texas, where Colin lived. As soon as they came out of their previous relationships, Colin and Anna entered into a short-lived relationship. After, Anna returned to her home in California. Meanwhile, Colin got back together with Caitlin Armstrong, with whom he had previously dated. Caitlin, a 34-year-old yoga instructor and realtor. There was no animosity between Anna and Colin after their breakup. They remained friends and active members of the cycling community. However, a problem arose. Caitlin did not like Colin's continued communication with Anna. Although she was unaware of their previous involvement, Caitlin could not understand that their relationship was strictly platonic and professional. She began to take steps to prevent them from communicating with each other, blocking calls and deleting messages from Anna on Colin's phone. Colin did not want to part with Caitlin, fearing he would lose her. In an effort to ease the situation and in a strange way calm Caitlin down, he saved Anna's number in his phone under a different name. Perhaps he couldn't think of anything else, but it wasn't the smartest move on Colin's part. In January 2022, Anna and Colin took part in a cycling competition in Arkansas, and Caitlin accompanied them. This led to an awkward situation. Anna seemed unaware of the issues her friendship with Colin was causing. Although there was no overt conflict, the atmosphere was tense. The day after the event, Anna texted Colin asking what was happening between them. She mentioned that if Colin preferred to stay just friends, she was okay with that, but they needed to discuss it. From Anna's message, it appeared she was uncertain about their relationship, at least from her end. Things became even more complicated when Caitlin learned that Anna and Colin had a romantic history. Caitlin's friends said that she was extremely angry, with some saying she even threatened Anna, claiming she would kill Anna. While such statements can be exaggerated in emotional moments and may not indicate actual intent, Caitlin felt her concerns were valid. Colin communicated with Anna during training, spent a lot of time with her at cycling competitions, and talked with her frequently. Since Caitlin was aware of their past relationship, she changed how she viewed the situation. To her, it seemed clear that Colin was cheating on her. This suspicion is further reinforced when she discovers that Colin has been hiding his messages with Anna under a fake name on his phone. Although Caitlin could have reacted impulsively, she remained composed and took months to process everything. On May 10th, Anna returned to Austin for a bike ride called Gravel Locomotives and then stayed with a friend. Colin was also on the trip. He planned to go swimming with Anna on May 11th at 5:30 p.m. He misled Caitlin about his plans that evening. He picked up Anna from her friend's house and they went swimming in a deep pool with a whirlpool as planned. After swimming, Colin and Anna had dinner at a poolside restaurant. He then dropped Anna off at her friend's house at 8:37 p.m. Colin sent Caitlin a text saying he had been asked to deliver flowers to a friend's house and was on his way home. He didn't wait for Anna to get home safely, assuming she would be fine. Just as Colin texted Caitlin, Anna's friend's doorbell rang, confirming her arrival. Of course, Caitlin didn't believe Colin's explanation about flower delivery. Curious about what Colin was really up to, Caitlin used a special app on her phone to track his location. She also found out where Anna was using the same app. This program is typically used for planning exercise routes, which can be shared and compared with other users. Additionally, it allows real-time tracking of someone's location, such as during a run or bike ride, or even to check on a partner suspected of cheating. At 8:37 p.m. that evening, Anna arrived at her friend's house to attend a birthday party. Around 10 p.m., her friend called 911 after finding Anna seriously injured from a brutal attack. The police immediately investigated this murder. Complicating the situation, the victim was from out of town. The police's first priority was to identify anyone in the area who knew Anna, and they quickly found leads. They asked Anna's friend if anything had been stolen, but there were no obvious signs of a burglary. The only notable thing missing was Anna's bicycle, which the police later discovered abandoned in some bushes nearby. The bike is quite valuable to a professional cyclist. However, if it was a burglary, why didn't the thief take the bicycle with him since nothing else was missing from the house? The police quickly concluded that the incident was not a failed burglary. Instead, it appears that the perpetrator had a personal grudge against the victim. Anna's friend, who had called 911, she was devastated by Anna's death, showed no signs of involvement, so the police ruled her out as a suspect. The investigation then turned to Anna's acquaintances in the area, specifically Colin and Caitlin. The police found out that Caitlin had a Class B warrant for her arrest. While this warrant was not for a serious crime, it was related to fraud. Caitlin had previously gone to a Botox clinic and, when it was time to pay, told the staff that her credit card was in her car. She left to get her credit card, but never returned. The fraud was minor, totaling only $600, but it provided the police with a reason to bring Caitlin in for questioning about Anna's murder. Officer Wilson immediately believed that it was time for Caitlin to pay for her actions. She did not deny her wrongdoing, as she likely faced only a minor penalty, such as an apology and a fine. Caitlin's behavior changed dramatically when the police first asked her about her activities over the last 24 hours and then inquired about Anna. When the mention of murder came up, her expression fell, and she sat frozen, clearly confused and unsure of how to respond. Despite her confusion, Caitlin attempted to explain her whereabouts, but her story was unconvincing. The investigator noted that Anna's friend had a doorbell camera and security cameras around her house. One camera focuses on the front of the house, capturing part of the sidewalk and alley with the view of passing cars and people. This footage became crucial. It showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee passing the house on May 11th, the same night Anna was killed. Caitlin was the one driving that vehicle. The police asked Caitlin to explain why she was in the area, but she couldn't provide a reason. She sat quietly, looking upset with her arms crossed, avoiding eye contact, and rolling her eyes. Meanwhile, the police were speaking with Colin, who shared the entire story about his friendship with Anna and the complications that arose with Caitlin. The detectives described the situation as a love triangle involving Colin, Caitlin, and Anna. She had no alibi, but on the other hand, the police had made an administrative error in the arrest warrant. And what was worse, the police database had her date of birth incorrect. Because of this mistake, Caitlin was released. After leaving the police station, Caitlin quickly took action. She didn't want to wait for the police to show up at her door again, which she was sure would happen pretty soon. Caitlin booked a flight from Chile to New York, deleted all her social media accounts, and vanished. If someone wants to disappear, the vast and varied landscapes of the United States are ideal for that. New York, with its massive urban environment, offers the perfect cover. Any police search in such a large city would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. On May 14th at 12:30, Caitlin was seen on surveillance camera entering Austin International Airport. From there, she took a connecting flight to Houston and then transferred to another flight to LaGuardia Airport in New York. On May 17th, U.S. Marshals obtained a warrant for Caitlin Armstrong's arrest, which they had previously failed to execute. Very soon after that, on May 18th, she was spotted at LaGuardia Airport. However, Caitlin was using smaller, shorter domestic flights to evade law enforcement, successfully staying one step ahead of the police. On the day she arrived in New York, she obtained an ID under the name Christine Armstrong, which was her sister's name. At the time, not much was known about this sister. The authorities believed that Christine did not live in New York, but was, in fact, in California. Getting an ID was a risky decision for Caitlin. The authorities now knew she was in New York, and the ID was linked to a relative with the same her last name. It was highly unlikely that her sister, who supposedly lived in California, would suddenly move to New York at the same time Caitlin was on the run. The police eventually obtained a copy of the ID issued to Caitlin, which listed her address as Camp Haven, a recreational area in Livingston Estate, New York. It has been 6 weeks since the search began, but there have been no leads. Colin also went into hiding, fearing that after he spoke out, Caitlin would return and harm him. Caitlin's sister, Tina Armstrong, also sought refuge. She avoided the media and never commented publicly about Caitlin. At this moment, Caitlin continued to evade contact with authorities, and the theory that she might be hiding at Camp Haven was eliminated. After many efforts, on June 29, 2022, U.S. federal agents and Costa Rican police surrounded the San Teresa nursing home. A joint task force entered the facility and quickly emerged with a woman dressed in black, her nose bandaged. She did not look at all like the pretty Caitlin who had long, lush red hair and bright eyes, but it was Caitlin. Authorities finally captured her. They discovered that Caitlin had left the U.S. via New York Airport on May 18th at 8 p.m. using a fake passport. She had never been to Camp Haven. Instead, her strategy involved taking different flights to mislead the police, which worked perfectly. While the police searched New York, she arrived in San Jose, Costa Rica. Since Caitlin's arrest, many rumors and theories have emerged. A significant question is whether she acted alone or had accomplices. She led a comfortable life as a yoga instructor and realtor, but she was not wealthy. In under 50 days, she managed to book and pay for multiple flights within the U.S. and an international flight to Costa Rica. The bruises and bandages on her face indicate she likely underwent plastic surgery soon after arriving in Costa Rica. And this is expensive. Eventually, police discovered her black Jeep at a local car dealership. On May 13th, Caitlin sold the car for $12,200. This partly explains why she is able to cover her expenses. However, $12,200 is not a substantial amount when trying to stay hidden, and it's doubtful it covered all her travel costs, living expenses, and surgery. Suspicion has shifted to her sister, Christine. It's important to note that this is just a theory and not confirmed, as there is no definitive evidence about anyone's involvement, including that of her sister. The day after Caitlin arrived in New York, she obtained an ID using Christine's name, and when she was arrested, she had a copy of Christine's driver's license with her. Meanwhile, the day after Caitlin's arrival, Christine applied for a new driver's license, claiming hers was lost. Did she assist Caitlin in evading the authorities? There is no answer to this question yet. Another possibility is that Colin may have played a significant role in the case. Some people suspect a conspiracy involving Colin and Caitlin. They believe that Colin's text to Caitlin, sent just after he dropped Anna off at her friend's house, claiming he was delivering flowers, was actually a secret message about Anna's location. There is no evidence to support this theory. It remains speculation. Nonetheless, Colin has a questionable history of honesty. He concealed his relationship with Anna and changed her name in his phone to prevent Caitlin from discovering the truth. He also told the police that he and Caitlin had broken up before Anna arrived in town, and that Caitlin was fine with him dating others. If that was the case, why did he text Caitlin about his whereabouts, and why was she upset about Anna and Colin's friendship? Since Caitlin's arrest, police have been working hard to gather evidence. One key piece is ballistic evidence linked to a 9mm weapon that was purchased by Colin, not Caitlin. A man gave this weapon to her in January 2022, and investigators found it in her home. Detectives are also looking into the possibility that someone from another country helped Caitlin. After her deportation, law enforcement held a press conference discussing how quickly she managed to escape and catch multiple flights between airports. Additionally, she possessed a passport that did not belong to her. On July 21, 2022, she participated in her first online trial, where she pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. In October 2022, she attended a second hearing to determine if she could be released while waiting for a jury trial. Various options were discussed, but Caitlin remained confident that she would confront a grand jury regarding the murder charges, insisting on her innocence. She will stay in the Travis County Jail until her trial. According to her lawyer, prosecutors are hesitant to take the case to trial, citing a lack of evidence for a conviction. The defense argues that the officers involved were inexperienced and did not properly act on information about Caitlin's ex-boyfriend. They also pointed out that Caitlin's and Colin's home was vandalized the night Anna was killed, questioning why this was not investigated thoroughly and who may have been responsible for the crime. The defense is arguing that the police were incompetent in their investigation. They believe law enforcement is trying to cover up mistakes and misconduct related to the case. The court hearing was scheduled for a week after the bail hearing, but the defense has since filed a motion to suppress evidence obtained by police, claiming that Caitlin was not read her rights. They argue that this invalidates the evidence, including her initial arrest tied to a Botox clinic. As a result, the judge has paused the trial while considering these motions, and a new pretrial date is set for June 22, 2023, although it has not yet been fully confirmed. A few months later, Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison for the murder of Anna Maria Wilson. The sentence was handed down on November 17, 2023, after she was convicted by a Texas jury the day before. Caitlin was convicted of attacking Anna 3 times in May 2022, motivated by jealousy over Anna's previous relationship with her boyfriend, Colin. Anna, a rising star in the professional cycling scene, was shot and killed in Austin, Texas. Investigation reveals disturbing links between Caitlin Armstrong, Colin, and Anna. Caitlin's jealousy led her to commit murder. Her trial ended in November 2023, resulting in a guilty verdict and a 90-year prison sentence. Although the case has been closed, the details surrounding Anna's death continue to cause debate. 52-year-old Daniel Mason Woolley lived in Clayton, Idaho in 1980. It is an extremely small town with a population of just 7 people. At 10 p.m. on September 22, 1980, Daniel was drinking at a sports club bar. A fight broke out between Daniel and a man named Walter James Mason. Daniel saw that Walter was hitting his wife, so Daniel and 2 other men escorted Walter out of the bar, and a fight took place. Walter made it to his pickup truck and took out 2 pistols. He then shot Daniel once on the right side of his head, just above the ear. Walter, they managed to flee. Investigators were not able to find him. A wanted poster was put up, but did not lead anywhere. It would take an unbelievably long time for investigators to find Walter. In October 2019, they finally found him. He had been living under the alias Walter James Allison, was arrested and taken back to Idaho to face trial. In June of 2021, Walter passed away in custody at the age of 85. It was revealed that Walter had lived the last 25 years in Rising Star, Texas. He lived with a woman named Beverly Meacham, who passed away a few months before he was arrested. Beverly's daughter did some research on Walter and found that he was wanted in Idaho. She told investigators and it led to the arrest. Daniel's son, Brett, had just to say, "After nearly 40 years of running free, the man who took my father's life passed away last night. I hope the devil has time for him. This has been a long chapter." A garbage collector was paralyzed on January 22, 2023, after sifting through a trash container near Columbia Park to find what was at the bottom of it. A blue suitcase was inside, sealed with black tape, and surrounded by several garbage bags. The suitcase contained a woman's body, which was easily identified because her head was visible from the suitcase. The worker was frightened upon finding something, so he drove several blocks and reported it to the police. The Capitol Police promptly dispatched a team of officers to investigate. Can you provide some examples? The police officers who arrived were met with a horrifying scene. The corpse was cradled in the suitcase and taken away. Valentina Tres Palacios was identified as the victim a few hours later. At the outset, the body was found to be free from any indications of violence, firearms, or knives, and it was not dismembered. Can you provide some examples? After opening the suitcase, Detectives discovered that the woman was wearing pajamas with a belt, suggesting that she had been attacked while sleeping by the person who killed her. A black cardboard box on the side of the suitcase contained items that helped identify the body. Police found a student ID, a password used by the victim when applying for a certificate, as well as some documents and personal belongings among them. The investigating team found it peculiar, as the presence of documents in such cases was not typical. Can you provide some examples? The police contacted the woman's family after finding the suitcase with her body, and they confirmed that she was with friends on Saturday, January 21st. The woman was found to have been struck multiple times in the head during the forensic examination. Her body was found with multiple injuries, including bleeding from the right part of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck that indicated strangulation. Valentina Tres Palacios was born on December 16, 2001, in Bogota, Colombia. She was enrolled in the Faculty of Commerce and International Business. The girl was a music enthusiast from an early age. After completing her professional DJ diploma, she was granted access to work as a DJ in Colombia due to her exceptional talent and musical sense. She had a career that began 3 years ago and resulted in many foreign friends. Valentina traveled to other countries where she typically gained knowledge or exhibited her accomplishments. She had the chance to perform alongside some of the most renowned musicians during this period. She toured over 20 cities in the country and was present at significant international events of this kind. Her past activities involved performing at festivals and touring throughout Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. People in her vicinity claimed that she had a bright future ahead. She was sought after and traveled throughout the nation. She dominated the best nightclubs and pursued her passion. Valentina was a very happy, smiling young girl who enjoyed the party. She maintained social media accounts where she shared her stage performances and always kept her followers informed about her daily routine. Can you provide some examples? In the electronic music industry of Colombia, she was recently recognized as the best amateur DJ. The girl shared about 2 things on her social media: her rising popularity in the electronic music industry at nightclubs, and her relationship with an American named John Poulos, whom she met online by the end of 2021. John and Valentina's communication skills improved as time passed. Valentina's initial desire for stability and commitment was not strong, but her relationship with him transformed into a romantic partnership that the young people eventually shared. John Poulos was a resident of America. Valentina was so invested in her life that he sent her money to attend the cosmetic course that involved injecting her lips with hyaluronic acid. The procedure was repeated to improve her cheekbones, and John also suggested surgery and silicone breast implants for his partner, modifying her appearance within a few months and becoming the talk of the town. He started sending money to the girl on a regular basis and eventually came up with the idea of marrying her. Originally, Poulos had plans to move to Colombia and live with Valentina, but she was skeptical because this person was so envious that he hired a private detective to track all her contacts and activities. Valentina's family was highly suspicious as she expressed her concern about this situation. John Poulos was prepared to spend the rest of his life with his partner by January 2023. He was committed to marrying Valentina and initiated the process of organizing the necessary paperwork. He rented an apartment in the northern area of Bogota, where he planned to spend the weekends with the girl until they found a permanent place to live. On Thursday, January 19th, Poulos arrived in Bogota. Around 8:53 p.m., he was caught on surveillance footage entering the building's apartment. Along with him, there was a blue suitcase that bore resemblance to the one used to find Valentina's corpse. John Poulos was the first person to be noticed after the disturbing discovery, as he was also the last one to have seen Valentina alive. The detectives' attempt to reach him resulted in the call being diverted to voicemail. Valentina's family members found Poulos to be a kind and collected individual. His demeanor was undeniable, and his plans to marry the young woman were evident. They were unable to fathom his involvement in this terrible crime, but these doubts were eliminated when investigators arrived at the apartment rental building, where it was discovered that the man had already left and was not found. On Monday, January 23rd, John Poulos took down his social media profiles in the early morning following Valentina's death. He was the sole suspect at that point. The revelation was made evident when investigators analyzed the surveillance camera footage in the building. From Friday evening to early Sunday morning, the Colombian Police and Prosecutor's Office examined hours of video footage from cameras in the areas where the young woman and her boyfriend were. The trash container was where the body was disposed of at this point. The footage and numerous WhatsApp conversations were instrumental in uncovering the girl's final hours. On January 20th, Valentina and Poulos made a deal to meet. Can you provide some examples? The man arrived on the 19th, the day before, and took up residence in the apartment where the couple had planned to live. After he texted Valentina, they started arguing on the same night because she was at a party with her friend and didn't anticipate him coming over. He inquired about the presence of significant individuals at the gathering and whether she was with any male. She wryly replied with a no, stating that it was his suspicions, and they had agreed to meet on the 20th. Prior to meeting John, Valentina had planned to visit various locations to care for herself, apply her lash extensions, and attend hair salons. On January 20th, the couple were unable to see each other due to their disagreement, and only in the evening, when Valentina's apartment was being monitored by surveillance cameras, did they know exactly when they were in that parking lot. The girls' possessions were being packed by John at 6 p.m. as the two of them moved to another apartment and began a new life. Valentina's journey across the country was marked by a series of emotional goodbyes, one of which was with her family and friends. She made a video call to her mother saying that she was going home. The video depicts the girl accompanied by Poulos, who hired a vehicle to transport Valentina's possessions. They were caught on surveillance footage entering the apartment with their possessions at 7 p.m. Valentina sent her mother a series of videos showing the apartment in their frequent exchanges to get things. The cameras captured them completing the move and engaging in other activities before heading back to their new home. It was Saturday, January 21st at 1 a.m. Around 3 a.m., the couple arranged a taxi to go to southeastern New York's nightclub, where Valentina was set to perform 2 hours later. Can you provide some examples? The club was reached by them at approximately 4 a.m. Valentina commenced work almost immediately. While she was busy, John Poulos remained with her. Can you provide some examples? At approximately 5 a.m., her performance concluded. Valentina and John, holding hands, headed to the nightclub's office. They encountered the proprietor of the establishment, his spouse, and her companion. Valentina's friends had not seen her since they left the venue at 6 a.m. Her smile was back on her face, shining brightly, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Valentina contacted her friend on the phone and stated that she had no intention of going anywhere on Saturday. She stated that she would probably stay in the apartment with her partner. Later on, they might go out to eat or cook together at their house. The last time Valentina spoke to her friend was at 9 p.m., and it was through video. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, revealed that her 13-year-old son was the final individual to converse with her on video. The girl was in bed with John. They both appeared to be in a state of happiness. The family had no further information about them. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building captured the young woman and her boyfriend. In the video, Valentina can be seen peering out of the apartment door while John stands in front of it. He seems contemplative and a little menacing, pacing back and forth, occasionally grimacing his face. He orders the elevator to go down and retrieve a delivery. Poulos was captured by the cameras again on Sunday, January 22nd at 9 a.m. He exits the room with 2 bags of garbage. Valentina was nowhere to be found on this occasion. The man drives to the parking area, takes a silver car, and places the bags in the back seat. Following that, he goes back to the apartment and retrieves 2 suitcases from the trunk. Subsequently, he heads back to the apartment. A gray blanket covers the suitcase that Poulos removed from the apartment where the clerk reads 10 a.m. He put it into a cart for shipping. A second bag was situated beside it. Valentina's head was wrapped in the blanket. The man surveys the parking area after parking. He perceives that nobody is in the vicinity. Moving ahead, he looks over to make sure nobody is going down in the elevator. Subsequently, he rapidly makes his way back to the vehicle. He glances at the mirror one last time and takes a sip of water before struggling to lift the heavy suitcase, which he puts in the trunk. The bag is the next item on the list. Subsequently, he takes control of the vehicle and departs. Surveillance cameras caught the car at different locations throughout the city around noon. It was evident that the subject was in search of a suitable spot to leave the suitcase. The car entered one of the parks and parked near the garbage containers at approximately 3 p.m. The driver exited and headed towards the container at that juncture. He surveyed the area, verified that no one was watching, and then removed the suitcase, which seemed excessive, before tossing it into the container. He went back to the car and removed the bag, which he then placed in the trash bin, closed the lid, and exited. The vehicle was traveling westward until it reached El Dorado International Airport. John's last known whereabouts were at the airport at 4:30 p.m. A $1 million reward was announced by the Ministry of Security on Monday, January 23rd, for any information that could lead to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. The Colombian authorities enlisted the help of Interpol to issue an arrest warrant as Poulos fled the country's border without indicating why. Additionally, he was the final person to witness the girl's existence. Can you provide some examples? On January 24th, the National Police of Panama stated that they had apprehended Poulos at El Dorado International Airport while he was traveling to Turkey. In an effort to obtain answers about Valentina's death, Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting him to the country. Over 14 criminal investigation specialists contributed to the investigation, collecting evidence to establish the facts. The analysis of over 300 hours of video footage from cameras was the outcome of methodological work carried out in partnership with the country's prosecutor office. The case yielded another crucial finding after the arrest of this individual. Valentina's mobile phone was discovered near the El Dorado International Airport by a security staff member. He stumbled upon a mobile phone on the grass while walking near a tenth of a minute gas station and picked it up. The man brought the discovered gadget home after he realized that it did not have a SIM card. He took the phone to sell it, unaware that it belonged to Valentina. The security guard's wife called him hours later in despair when she realized that the photo of the girl in the wallpaper on the mobile phone was identical to those seen on social media and also for the young woman found dead in the trash container. Unfortunately, the phone had already been marked for sale and repackaged because someone was willing to buy it. Therefore, information that could have been advantageous in this situation went unguarded. Can you provide some examples? Following that, the driver of the car that the couple had driven to the nightclub gave his testimony, which was followed by a big question. The driver was tasked with transporting the couple to a nightclub located in the southern part of the city. Before getting into the car, Poulos paused for a moment before Valentina exited. She got into the car and screamed that she had written something untoward. The driver looked at her in disbelief before checking his phone and finding out that Tres Palacios had sent him a message to customer care, warning him in Spanish that he was in danger. The driver looked at the girl and inquired if she was all right, but her response was uncertain as Poulos entered the car and asked. She said, "Are you okay?" John and Valentina conversed in English as the car was being driven, and the man asked if they were bilingual, to which he replied with a positive answer. Poulos remained silent and instead corresponded with Valentina on WhatsApp. Upon leaving about 4 a.m., the driver went to the nightclub with the couple and then forgot about the incident until he was informed of the young woman's death several days later. Due to Valentina's open WhatsApp session, her friend who lived in Cartagena came to the prosecutor office in Bogota and surrendered their computer with the chats providing clues about what had occurred. One of the pieces of evidence found in Valentina's chat was that her friend had spotted a suitcase with her body, which was said to have been there. The friend said that on the same day Valentina was in Bogota, she got a text from Poulos and received several selfies with his luggage. The suitcase that John brought with him was akin to the one found by authorities in the container. The color was indistinguishable. There's no clear answer as to why the young girl left her WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, but all of these texts helped authorities get what happened that night when Valentina was killed. It was determined by forensic investigators that she died from asphyxiation caused by being tightly strangled with a rope. Prior to her passing, there were indications on her body that she had been a victim of violence. All indications from the forensic examination indicate that Valentina Tres Palacios passed away while sleeping. This conclusion was drawn up by criminalists because she was wearing pajamas. There was no doubt in the evidence above that John Poulos was present. The indictment stated that the suspect did not acknowledge responsibility for the girl's death, citing the current situation and the concealment of evidence. Rather, he said, "There were violations when I was arrested in Panama because we did not have a lawyer to talk to." Poulos' Spanish language skills were not strong enough to warrant a translator, and the hearing lasted for more than 5 hours. The crime committed by Poulos is attributed to his involvement with Valentina, and he attempted to disappear without a trace, erasing his social media accounts after the incident. On May 19, 1987, John Poulos was born in Wisconsin, United States. He had 3 children and was previously wedded in his native land. His criminal record included charges of violence against women, including obtaining a restraining order against his ex-wife. The use of pornographic websites was reported by a woman to whom John Poulos had sent money who claimed that this person was actively browsing. According to her, he spent approximately 5-6 hours daily on the site, and she mentioned that despite being a man, his behavior was often bizarre in nature, such as fantasizing and recounting ghost stories. Another model who testified on a modeling page said she knew the American from Texas, America. She ceased writing to him after a peculiar comment he made, which included the words jealousy and death. John's question was, "If I were at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" The girl refused in response. "It's likely that one of us will die due to jealousy," replied Poulos. The witness stated that despite the subject having sent money to the magical lord, she never conversed with him on video because his communication was often unusual. It is important to acknowledge that John had certain conduct towards his victims. He contacted Valentina on social media and started sending her money with persistence and consistency in the case. This approach to women's treatment as property was a warning sign that the trusting women initially neglected, and Poulos believed he could purchase them with money from the outset. The factors were disregarded, leading to the possibility that the victim unintentionally stumbled into her abuser's trap and was eventually recognized due to his own mistake. The authorities involved in this case are assuming that John thought the waste disposal system in Colombia was equivalent to that in the United States, where he resided. According to him, the waste material had settled in the container and would eventually be disposed of. Poulos did not assume that recycling workers and street dwellers frequently sift through garbage to discover items that can be sold or employed as something. John Poulos is being held in a private cell in Bogota today. Now all that remains is to demonstrate that all these pieces of evidence connect the individual to the crime and to discover the motive behind this dreadful murder. In Colombia, the criminal code provides for a prison sentence of up to 50 years for a crime in which an American is accused. With the assistance of a special group formed by the Capitol Police in coordination with the country's Attorney General's office, criminal investigators will be engaged in the search for material evidence to clarify this fact. Such cases once again demonstrate to us how dangerous social networks can be when getting to know someone. Valentina thought she had found love and someone with whom she would spend the rest of her days. However, this did not happen. And like many people in the world, she too thought that nothing like this would happen to her. Rose Marie Bly was born on September 16, 1987. She was a 22-year-old wife and mother of 2 daughters, both under the age of 2. She was last seen in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, at 7 p.m. on August 21, 2009. She left her home in the 2300 block of River Road to travel 5 miles to Cushing, Wisconsin, to meet a cousin at a bar. Her husband stated that sometime that night, Rose contacted him and said she would be home by midnight. However, she never arrived in Cushing to meet her cousin and has never been heard from again. 5 days after her disappearance, her 2001 Pontiac Grand Am was found strangely in the parking lot west of the post office in downtown Grantsburg. The lot is normally used by semi-truck drivers to park their tractor trailers. The car was undamaged. There was no evidence of foul play, and the keys were missing. Grantsburg is about 30 miles from her home in St. Croix Falls and 15 miles from Cushing, where she was supposed to be going. A few weeks after the car was found, the village drained Memory Lake to make sure her body wasn't there. It is approximately a 5-minute walk from where her car was found to the lake. Rose has family in Grantsburg, and she graduated from Grantsburg High School. Rose didn't have any credit cards or debit cards, and she left home with very little money. Her marriage was troubled, and police were called to the home at least once to intervene in a domestic violence incident. Her husband had previously filed for divorce in June 2009 but withdrew the filing after reconciling. He passed a polygraph test and isn't considered a suspect in her disappearance. His divorce petition was granted in 2010, and he now has sole custody of their daughters. Rose had fallen off a horse a week before her disappearance. She told her mother she was having headaches after the accident, and her mother advised her to see a doctor, but there's no evidence she ever did. Her mother speculated that she may have become disoriented due to her injury and wandered away. Since her disappearance, the Polk County Sheriff's Office has received over 200 tips and has interviewed more than 150 people, hoping to find answers. However, she remains missing, and the case is unsolved.